What if everything you're tracking in fintech marketing is leading you in the wrong direction? Lyndi Thompson, Stripe's first demand gen hire and now building demand at Every.io as head of marketing, is with us today. We're discussing why it's time to ditch outdated tactics and rethink how you build trust and pipeline. I'm Tracy.
I'm DJ, and this is Down to Fintech.
Down to Fintech.
Welcome, Lyndi.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. Honored to be here.
We're so glad to have you here. And you were the first demand gen hire at Stripe. That's crazy. If you're going to think of fintech, you're automatically going to think of Stripe.
Yes.
It's a household name.
Absolutely.
A real OG. So tell us, what is demand gen marketing? And
Absolutely.
what was that like being at the beginning?
My perspective when it comes to demand marketing is that you're scaling your best salesperson. So you're taking the language, the experience they have, the empathy they have for buyers, and bringing it into the marketing world in a scaled fashion. So that's the very basic kind of philosophy that I have. And to dive in a little bit about my adventure at my previous fintech company, I actually learned about Stripe in a very funny way. I was at a B2B conference. They were up on stage literally talking about how they didn't need marketing. 3 months later, I got a call. Hey, let's chat. We're thinking about hiring demand. So that was kind of a funny transition. Stripe is traditionally known as more of a product marketing org. And for me coming in, just kind of stepping into that role, it was really understanding like what kind of customers need that kind of experience that you would have with sales. Is it the enterprise folks? Is it more mid-market? Is our more of our developers? And so really understanding who Stripe was servicing then and where they wanted to go was kind of my first mission.
Right, yeah, and we're going to dive into all that. So how do you even start with a new fintech startup? You're trying to target these enterprises, and you're with a team that hasn't even started their marketing yet.
Yeah, absolutely. So it just starts with like really getting humble, eating a slice of humble pie, taking a step back, understanding the audience, where can we uniquely play, and making sure internally we're all aligned to execute.
We've seen this too, where, and maybe this is from your experience too, where founders they're so into their product and they almost leave out, okay, what is the buyer thing? What does the buyer perceive your product and what benefit that it will have for them from their perspective?
Yeah, I'm not going to recommend this necessarily to everyone, but I currently work for a founder, Rajiv Bahira, who is a marketer himself in his previous career. He was leading games at Disney, and to hear his mindset about how he thinks about the audience constantly is a huge strength that I don't think a lot of startups get, that kind of perspective of like, how can we get closer to them? How can we constantly make sure that they're getting value right away? How is it really clear to them? How do we get them to stay in stickiness? I think it's natural for marketers, but not necessarily founders. And so we like to put him on stage to like talk about that, right?
Right. And when you come into a new company, what's the first thing that you're looking to do to set up demand gen?
My philosophy kind of like is principled in 3 different areas. We talked about audience, but really it's like, what's that prospect experience? I need to master that. I need to learn what's going on there. Is there a step in which marketing should be responsible for making sure that experience is better? The next one is like, is the team able to do their work? Are they able to do it at a level that's like something they're proud of? So that's like my next principle, making sure the team can do their best work. And the last one is like, is everyone using data actually to inform their decisions, or was it more of a gut check situation? So those 3 principles takes up, between a couple of weeks or so to really get a good sense of, depending on the complexity of the company. But at Stripe or here at Every or any other company I've worked for, it's that same idea, just going through the motions. Do we understand what the customer's experience is? Are there places where marketing could do better? Reapproach it. Adjust that. Is the team have the tools and capacity and the brain space, the right skill sets to execute? And then on the data side, it's like, well, do we have enough data to directionally help us make decisions, or do we need to invest more?
And with data too, are we even looking at the right data? Sometimes
Absolutely.
we think we do have enough data, and you're like, we don't really care about that data, and that could blow someone's mind. That's the way we're following.
I know. And it's every company, honestly. I've never been at a company where they felt like their questions were being answered by the data. And thankfully, when I was raised at Tableau, we were constantly being very critical of our own dashboards, our own reports, our logic behind how we did things. And it's probably not really answered the question of like, directionally, are we going the right way? Are we bringing in the right customers? Are those customers happy? Do we have data help us, start to go on the journey of finding out if we are? And then being open, like, don't be precious about it. And I think that's also another thing I see at a lot of companies where things have worked okay for X amount of time, weeks, years, months, and they're not particularly ready to change it. But if it's not answering the questions that you have and it's not bringing you forward and making progress, you need to be open to letting that go.
Can you give us an example of like the right questions and the wrong questions?
One actually happened today, so that's nice and fresh in my mind. We had categorized certain prospects in a way that made sense for our current audience, but we are being pushed and in the right direction to go after other folks that makes no sense to ask those questions of them. One question is like funding amount, right? Well, if you're a professional services legal company, that's not relevant to you. And what happens is that the prospect disqualifies themselves. So they're going through the journey, you ask them how much they're funding, and they're like, oh, that's not for me, and they back out. Doesn't mean they're not a good customer. But I think that's honestly really understanding the audience. It always goes back to audience, right? It's not so much just like top of funnel and bottom of funnel. It's like, what's that whole experience for them? So part of what I think about with any company looking at data, whether it's a nonprofit that I'm on the board of, it's like, what is honestly your goal and how are you thinking about that throughout your process of like what you're reporting on, what data you're looking at? And we just break it down. Like I said, we serve out slice of humble pie, 'tis the season, and we all just take a step back and going like, is this really helping us inform our next decision? Are we actually making prospects disqualify themselves? Are we not even surfacing up to the right people? So I did an email promotion yesterday, and I got a couple of replies back of saying like, hey, I need support. So that immediately told me there's a gap to figuring out how to get support. We found that also at Stripe. When you start out product-led growth, often people are just looking at numbers. There's not necessarily a lot of like product feedback unless it goes straight to the founder, which I think almost all fintechs kind of had that experience in the early days.
Yeah.
If you can get the team who's executing to be closer to that,
Yep.
there's not this delay from the actual experience that people are having to the messaging, to the support channels, to figuring out how this needs to be fixed and improved. Because often it's going up, right? Or not being told at all.
Right. It's like the client service people are kind of like a wall. They're like trying to like, pacify and fix small little things that maybe aggregated could be valuable information.
Absolutely. Absolutely. At the case of what was interesting about our startups at Stripe, we launched a product called Atlas, which is very similar to what we offer here at Every Offering Corporation. But at Atlas, folks couldn't necessarily get a hold of anyone. And if they happened to get mysteriously into sales, they would see them as too small and just like cancel it. So we're like, why don't we just let a percentage through? We learned so much. And part of the learnings by taking those recordings where it wasn't so much about product stuff that they were stuck about, it was like their own business stuff. They wanted to look to the brand, to this fintech, to this financial leader for advice. And it happened that if you're going to deposit that money you got from YC into an account, you'd like to have a relationship with them.
Yeah.
And so we saw that over and over again by building relationships with folks who are like eager to lean in to be part of the community. You can actually like not only drive more revenue, but you drive stickiness across all your products. Like you would think that common sense, but moving towards more of a community-led approach is very much what Stripe, what Calm, what Every, like all these different companies want to be able to do. They just haven't figured it out completely.
So what's interesting here is with these complex sales cycles, especially in B2B fintech, where there could be up to, over 100 touch points and huge buying committees that are not traditional in other industries. Attribution gets tricky. So how are you managing that, and how's that tie into the questions that you need to be asking yourselves and your audience?
So one of the beautiful things about demand marketing is that we are aligned with sales, and every org I've ever led or been part of, I push for that. When it comes down to attribution, I always guess why are we measuring it that way? And they're like, oh, well, we just have to know where our money's going. Okay, great. Well, let me pull down this company that the deal cycle's been 18 months. There's 272 touches. where do you want to invest more? And they're like, we want more demo requests. Every
Oh
single
my-
time. That's the response.
Of
And I
course.
go, cool, but this company took 18 months to get across and 200 plus touches. So it wasn't just a demo request.
Oh my gosh. That's like the tagline of founders is like, book a demo, book a demo.
Don't you want a demonstration,
demo.
a personalized tour, right? It's not that they don't want to see your product,
Mhm.
but really, why did they come to it all? It's because they had a particular question or problem, and they thought possibly for a moment you might be able to solve it. And instead, we put like barrier after barrier, jump through all these hoops, right? So when I think about like measuring in the money and where people are investing, I think about ultimately what the goal is for the whole company, not just for marketing. Marketing should be touching nearly every single opportunity. And if they're not, something's broken. So when I see forecasting deals where like marketing owns 50%, and I was like, no, we own 100%. We will help drive opportunity creation for 50%. No problem with that one. In fact, it should be more like 70% that we're helping with op creation. But also, what about lead creation? What about how long the deal cycle is? So all these conversations to me start with that executive alignment. But if you really run it as a unit, as if like you're scaling your best salesperson, right? Not these separate, disparate departments, we should own all of it. Like all the go-to-market function should own all the revenue goal, all the pipeline goal. And when it comes to attribution, what I typically like to look at is the very basic is lead creation and op creation. You can buy fancy tools. I won't tell you not to, but you probably don't need them for most companies, as long as you have some tracking in place to understand where it's going. For companies where it's high trust, you're going to have to invest more in face-to-face. Whether that's a space where somebody can come in and talk to you if you're a bank, right? The more risk on the customer, I have a strong belief that they need to have an ability to talk to a real person. In the age of AI, I don't think you really can replace events with AI. So that's going to be pretty sturdy and high trust potential. Every single one of the marketers on my team, I can put in an event. They can demo, they can answer questions. A lot of them are entrepreneurs previously. And so when they think about that, they think, all the conversations they had during that dinner, that event, that conference, whatever. Yes, it's a lead creation in the system. But over time, their follow-up emails get triggered, their webinars, the next event, and they see that out of like the adventure to becoming a customer, the 80, 90% of it marketing touched, that's gold to me. I'd rather spend time investing in trust than ads. So find me more opportunities to spoil these customers. Find me more opportunities to make them more successful. And so that's kind of fuzzy, right? So we break it down into like forecasted, top of funnel, here's what we think we need, rough estimates of conversion rates. Like it's not that we just like throw out the forecasting outside, but to get an alignment that we all own that ultimate growth goal is so much healthier than being in orgs where marketing just like stops at the 50%, right? Oh, sales didn't follow up. Oops. Oh, the MDRs, SDRs didn't do anything. Like, no. We have a customer called, his name's Lester. His company's called Artemis, and he's using AI to basically scale salespeople, but on the research side, right? And like that is gold, right? So lean into things that help you help sales, help you get to that top line. And then look at like where you have the opportunities to invest more in building trust. And then I put the rest in retargeting, honestly. Like we are increasing that percentage of investment into retargeting, like no one's business, which like all consumer businesses have been doing forever. I came from a customer data platform at Imparticle, and like that was their game. Like their game is not necessarily net new. It's to keep the people who already are sold in the product. That's a long-winded answer around like attribution and spend, but I think in any fintech situation where you guys are trying to take over the management of something that's so precious and critical for a business like Runway, like you have to invest in trust.
Absolutely.
I just had a question around that, around trust in marketing, in person and sales and relationships with prospects that you have, and that obvious point of trust in the face-to-face. Those are obvious places of trust, like a little bit more obvious to the actual executives, right? But I've seen a lot of pressure or responsibility put on marketing to just make the marketing build trust. Like, how do you market the trust into it? And is that a misconception?
For sure.
I'd love to hear
For
you talk
sure.
about that.
So I work for a number of nonprofits, like on their board, or I help with marketing things. And it's honestly, most of our prospects, we do surveys, right, with these folks who are just generously writing checks. The number one thing that everyone says in those surveys is they want to know where the money went, right? And I think that's the same if you take it to more complex businesses. If I give you my time and effort, what are you going to do with it? Right? And I think that that's the piece that marketing can help and like trigger. But ultimately, it's the product, it's customer success, it's the nurture track, it's follow-up times. It doesn't matter how pretty the flyer was, or the ad, or the video, or how amazing the massage was, the booth. How did you actually deliver on what you said you're going to do? Right?
Yeah.
Like, did you actually deliver on what marketing said? Because you cannot outspend bad experience. I was at a company, they spent literally $7 million on a TV news ad that ran for a day. But like if you send in a support request and no one responds, doesn't matter how well you see that brand everywhere. Marketing can't solve that experience problem unless we have more control to deliver, which very often we don't. And there's certain situations where you probably could give marketing more of a role to like make sure to deliver. One's partnerships, honestly.
Yeah.
I've seen partnerships being put in sales or biz dev or even in product. But if you give it to marketing, it gives them a little power to deliver on what they said.
I love this. Talk a little bit more about the difference between putting partnerships in marketing versus sales or biz dev.
Yeah. I think with sales and biz dev, their goal is deals, right? And they're going to rate that partnership based on the quality of deals versus marketing is like, well, what about content together? What about finding ways to deliver something that actually gives value? So we have a partner called Capital Factory down in Austin, Texas, and they're like, let's do a workshop. Okay, great. So what things your customers, your founders need? And so we literally brought our brains together with no expectation that we're going to get 100 deals out of it. It was literally, how do we make this community get value out of this experience? I'd much rather invest in that. And then I have an opportunity to actually deliver value.
Yeah.
Right. I can run that workshop. I can use my budget. I can use that experience. I can nurture them, which is way better than me sitting at a booth. Right. So like giving partnerships to marketing allows like a much more abstract artistic sort of experience of building these relationships, content, experiences versus sales and product is probably using it for like important things, integrations, technology, opportunities, resellers, that sort of whole world. But the way you can give marketing more ability to deliver on what they're actually saying is to give them ways to execute on it.
That also informs the marketing team and the sales team in this bi-directional way where they can feed off each other instead of working in
Absolutely.
these silos.
Yeah.
Handing more of the nurture to the marketing team because a potential client may, they go through the top of funnel, they eventually get to a sales rep, but they're not ready to buy yet, but they still need the continued experience to build trust.
Absolutely.
Sales is like, oh my gosh, I'm reaching out to them every month or every couple of months and I'm doing the same thing or I'm sending them an article. It's like, yeah, the sales team has to, when they're only responsible for nurturing, it's the same experiences they're able to provide. They're very limited, right? And partnership, when you have partnerships, you're bringing in a whole new thing, a whole new aspect that your prospect hasn't seen. So they're more excited on this nurture journey.
Absolutely. And then when they're ready and they have a specific question, we can send it to somebody and that salesperson is now set up for success.
Let's talk about that. How to create that best salesperson. What do you do? Do you create or do you identify first?
We can raise our own, we can hire our own, pros and cons. So back at Tableau, we'll spin way back to like 2013, 2014. Kelly Wright was running the sales org and she had a very unique philosophy. So she brought in people multiple weeks. I don't remember how many, but it was many. And by the end, like a small percentage were actually hired. Because she believed in X amount of weeks that if you were intense about it and you really wanted to, you would learn enough to check off all the boxes and be a worthy candidate. And they had an exceptional sales team and it was real dialed in. They also had a gigantic enablement team and they had a gigantic product marketing team. And so they were very well set up to create an environment to raise their own sales team. In almost every other scenario that I was in, let's say we'll talk about Accolade for a second, If you were to pull in a brand new junior salesperson, they would not be successful for the first 2 years because the requirement to sell benefits is a Rolodex. You have to have relationships. You have to know how things are sold. It's very old school. It was all face to face. There was nobody looking at screens. There was no Zoom meeting. Like that just wasn't how they sold. It was relationships, right? Versus you go to the Stripe world, almost all those folks had come from SaaS or like finance, but as they moved up market, they didn't really understand how CFOs thought. And so we had to teach them that. They didn't really understand like a procurement process and why it would take 6 months to have like all these security things done because they'd focused on a smaller account. So adding in some sales folks with that expertise to help like raise everybody up could work if you give that space to them. Then the product marketing side, Stripe was awesome, and they still are on the product marketing side. Probably the best product marketing team I've ever seen. They were so focused on enabling the user that sales became kind of a thing that they, knew that would be kind of a nice to have. But as they switched to enabling sales, that's when it took off. So that engine of like making sure sales has the time to learn, has the right people around them, the right environment, and you're culling folks who are just not a good fit, is what I've seen work really well.
And can you really break down what you mean by enablement? And how this is working?
Fuzzy, fluffy word.
Yeah, it's a fluffy word. Let's get into
Yes.
specifics on like what does that look like between these teams?
Absolutely. So I think the first thing is getting them with like probably whoever's the best at talking about the product. And not once, not twice, but like often. And so here at Every, it's our CEO. Like he's the chief salesperson before we hired anybody, right? So he will spend a lot of time with sales. Then we hired a head of sales. He's really great too. But that's all well and great. But I think the other piece that we have to understand is where do the salespeople feel uncomfortable? And uncovering that is a pain in the rump. But when it comes to enablement on the marketing side, what does marketing need to do? We need to figure out what they're being asked and how comfortable they are answering it. I don't know if you all started your careers in like customer service, but I did. And I spent a lot of time behind the counter of like taking people's orders, whether it was coffee or sandwiches or whatever. And you have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I think a lot of salespeople were not allowed to be uncomfortable or not allowed to like say, hey, I don't know. And so then you watch these recordings after the sales call is done. And that's where product marketing and marketing should really be spending a lot of time, reviewing those calls. Where's the hesitation? What question did this particular prospect ask, customer ask that we didn't have a really good response for? All of that we document. We're creating playbooks. We're helping them with copy. We're talking through those kind of uncomfortable moments. We're teaching them it's okay to give us product feedback. We're teaching the salespeople it's okay to say like, that copy didn't work. Hey, that campaign didn't work. You have to create this environment where marketing is not just creating a bunch of fluff that sits in a Google Drive and no one uses it. It's almost like you're doing marketing to a prospect, right? You're figuring out your audience,
Right.
which is the sales team, figuring out their problems, and then creating resources that they can use right away. All you're doing is creating resentment and this kind of missed expectations. Find out where they're struggling and get them to be comfortable enough to tell you frequently and often. I don't want to be sitting around the campfire 5 years from now and being like, yeah, I was just nervous to tell you that campaign didn't work.
Right.
I don't want
Oh my
that.
gosh. That's almost like, deterred. Like they're like, you wouldn't say that. You only say positive things.
Yes.
It's all about positivity, right? And like that's what support
Mhm.
means. And that's actually
Yes.
dysfunctional, not being able to give honest
Yes.
feedback.
Absolutely. And I think with enablement, to me, it's constantly becoming a master of your audience. So I need to learn what's happening in sales. How are they looking at their reports? How are their campaigns responding? How are calls going? Watching recordings. Like I watch Gong or Circle Back or whatever tool the company has at least 5 times a day. Right. And that's like, I should be as good at like identifying the pain points as I am for my customers.
I'm down to Fintech, baby. Now let's make that neck connect. You know the vibe. We're down to Fintech. Don't ghost your goals. Get DTF. I'm down to Fintech.